The sea was black that night. No moon, no starlight, only the hiss of oars slicing through salt water and the creak of timbers carrying the weight of an empire's last hope. On the horizon, faint lantern lights swayed like fireflies caught in the wind, growing brighter, closer. The enemy was coming. The year was 678 AD. The Eastern Roman Empire, what we call Byzantium, was fighting for its life. From the deserts of Arabia, the Umayyad Caliphate had surged across 3 continents in less than half a century. Persia had fallen. Egypt, Syria, and North Africa, all gone. Now their fleets aimed for the final jewel of the Mediterranean, Constantinople. For nearly 7 centuries this city had stood as the beating heart of Rome's eastern half, its golden domes catching the first light of dawn. But tonight the marble spires were shrouded in darkness, their people silent behind colossal walls that had never been breached. Siege after siege had failed, but this time was different. This time the danger came not from land but from the sea. The Arab navy was a force like none the Byzantines had faced before. Hundreds of warships, their sails catching the night breeze, advanced in perfect formation. The Byzantines knew that once these ships reached the city's harbors, the walls would count for little. Supplies could be cut off. Starvation and disease would do what no army had managed, bring the queen of cities to her knees. And then, a sound. Deep, hollow, metallic, the groan of bronze siphons being unlocked. The Byzantine crews moved with quiet precision, their eyes avoiding the long dragon-headed tubes protruding from the sides of their dromons, sleek warships built for speed and striking power. Inside the bellies of these vessels, sealed clay jars sloshed with a mixture so volatile that even its makers feared it. The enemy's lead ships drew closer. Shouts in Arabic carried over the water, mingling with the rhythmic slap of oars. A single torch was raised high aboard the Byzantine flagship, the signal. The first blast came with a scream of metal under pressure. A stream of liquid fire erupted from the dragon's mouth, arching across the darkness before smashing into the hull of the nearest enemy galley. The effect was instant and horrifying, flames that did not dim even as men leapt into the water. In fact, the fire burned hotter on the sea, dancing across the waves as if the water itself had turned traitor. Panic spread like the flames themselves. Oars were pulled too fast, breaking under strain. Orders were shouted, then swallowed by chaos. The Arab fleet had faced arrows, stones, even boiling oil before, but never this. Never fire that clung to skin and wood alike, that could not be doused by water but instead fed upon it. The night sky lit up in a hellish glow, illuminating wide eyes and open mouths, the faces of men watching their comrades vanish in walls of flame. The Byzantines advanced, each burst of Greek fire breaking the enemy's formation further. Some ships turned to flee, crashing into their own lines in desperation. Others sank slowly, the glow of their destruction fading beneath the black water. When the last tongues of flame flickered out, the sea was silent again, except for the distant sound of retreating oars. That night was more than a victory. It was a statement: Byzantium was not done yet. Against all odds, the empire had found a weapon to match the tide of history, and perhaps turn it. But the triumph carried a shadow. Only a handful of men knew the secret of this liquid fire, and fewer still could wield it without disaster. The weapon was as dangerous to its masters as it was to their enemies. One mistake, and Constantinople's savior could become its executioner. To understand how an empire on the brink birthed such a weapon, we must step back, to the years of fear and siege, of desperate counsels and whispered promises, to the moment when science, alchemy, and necessity collided. This was not just a battle won with fire. It was the culmination of decades of survival against the impossible, and the start of a new chapter in naval warfare. As the embers faded into the night sky, the defenders of Constantinople knew this was only the beginning. The Arab fleet would return, stronger, more determined. But so too would the fire. And in the heart of the imperial palace, the formula for this miracle, or this curse, would be locked away, guarded with the weight of an empire's survival. The victory at sea was dazzling, but it was no end to the war. For the people of Constantinople, the flames that devoured the enemy fleet were only a brief light in an ever-lengthening night. The first Arab siege of Constantinople had begun in 674 AD and would grind on for years. Unlike sudden raids or short campaigns, this was a slow constriction, a noose tightening around the city's lifelines. The Umayyad Caliphate, led by Caliph Muawiyah I, understood that the city's walls were legendary, perhaps impregnable. So they sought to starve the empire into submission. Arab fleets established seasonal blockades. In spring, they would sail into the Sea of Marmara, seizing islands and cutting off supply ships. In autumn, they would retreat to winter quarters along the Anatolian coast, only to return the next year stronger and better prepared. This rhythm of siege and withdrawal was deliberate, a war of attrition designed to exhaust Byzantine resources. Inside the city, life narrowed to survival. Markets grew empty. Grain, once abundant from Egypt, was now scarce, its price soaring beyond the reach of common citizens. People whispered of famine. Fireside rumors claimed that even the emperor's court rationed bread. Families huddled under the shadow of the Theodosian walls, the triple-layered fortifications that had withstood every barbarian horde, praying they would hold against this new enemy. The Byzantine navy patrolled ceaselessly, but each skirmish came at a cost. Sailors were lost to storms, disease, or the relentless arrows of Arab marines. The empire's once vast territories had shrunk, leaving fewer ports, fewer resources, and fewer men to call upon. Morale trembled like a candle in the wind. The Arab forces, for their part, were no less determined. Their fleets were manned by skilled sailors from conquered Egypt and Syria, their warships built for speed and maneuverability. Every season they returned with more vessels, more soldiers, and greater knowledge of the city's defenses. The sound of their war drums on the horizon became as familiar as the tolling of church bells within the city. Yet amid the tension, the Byzantines had an unspoken weapon beyond Greek fire: endurance. This was an empire accustomed to surviving on the edge. For centuries they had fought Persians, Goths, Huns, and Avars. The city's defenders were hardened, disciplined, and bound by the knowledge that their home was more than a capital, it was the spiritual and political heart of Christendom. Still, Emperor Constantine IV knew that even the strongest walls could not endure an endless siege. He convened his war council in the Great Palace, beneath mosaics of emperors past, to weigh their options. The choice was grim: attempt a risky open battle at sea, or wait and hope the enemies would falter first. The memory of the Arab fleets burning was fresh, but Greek fire alone could not win a war. Supplies of the mixture were limited, and each use risked revealing too much about its capabilities. As the siege stretched into its fourth year, desperation mounted. Disease crept through the city in the humid summers. In the winter, frost rimmed the stones of the aqueducts, and the cold winds from the Black Sea cut through even the thickest cloaks. Still the walls stood, and still the Arab fleets returned. The tension was palpable, a city caught in the space between life and death, victory and ruin. Children grew up under siege, their earliest memories the sight of enemy sails on the horizon. Merchants became soldiers. Priests became quartermasters. Every man and woman understood, if Constantinople fell, the lands of Europe would lie open before the caliphate. By 678 AD, the long dance of blockade and resistance had reached a breaking point. The Arab navy prepared for its greatest push, aiming to crush the last remnants of Byzantine strength in a decisive confrontation. The Byzantines, weary yet unbroken, prepared to meet them, with their fire-breathing ships waiting like predators in the dark. The stage was set for an inferno that would decide not just the fate of a city, but the shape of history itself. The miracle of the sea, the fire that burned upon water, was no accident of fortune. Its creation began years before the siege, in the hands of a man whose name still drifts between history and legend, Kallinikos of Heliopolis. Heliopolis, once a thriving city in the Levant, had fallen to Arab forces. Kallinikos, a skilled engineer and reputed master of chemical arts, fled westward, bringing with him both his loyalty to Byzantium and a dangerous idea. Some say he had experimented with incendiary mixtures in his homeland. Others whisper he learned his craft from ancient scrolls hidden away since the days of Alexandria's great libraries. Whatever the truth, what he proposed to the emperor was both brilliant and terrifying, a weapon that would defy the laws of nature. The Byzantines already knew the value of fire in warfare. Flaming arrows, oil-soaked projectiles, and burning pitch had been used for centuries. But Kallinikos's formula was something different, a liquid that could be projected under pressure, would ignite on contact, and could not be extinguished by water. In fact, it would feed upon it, spitting and hissing more violently as it spread. The exact recipe remains one of history's most enduring secrets. Scholars speculate a blend of petroleum, naphtha, sulfur, resin, and quicklime, volatile ingredients available in the empire's far-flung territories. But speculation is all it is. The Byzantines guarded the secret as if the empire's soul depended on it, and in many ways, it did. Creating Greek fire was only half the challenge. Delivering it in the chaos of naval battle required an entirely new kind of weapon. Imperial shipwrights and metalworkers labored in secrecy, crafting bronze siphons mounted on the prows of warships, shaped like the open jaws of beasts and dragons. These devices could hurl the flaming liquid in a deadly arc, turning each ship into a moving forge of destruction. The training for the crews was equally meticulous. Handling Greek fire was as dangerous as facing it. The mixture was stored in sealed, heat-resistant containers, its ignition timed to the moment it left the siphon. One slip, one miscalculation, and the flames could turn back upon the very men who wielded them. Word of the weapon spread in whispers, carried by sailors who had glimpsed its preparation or seen it tested in remote coves. To the Byzantines it was a divine gift, perhaps even a miracle bestowed by God to protect his chosen city. To their enemies it was sorcery, a monstrous, unholy creation. By the time the Arab siege reached its height, the weapon was ready. The city's defenders had not only a new tool of war, but a psychological edge that could shatter an enemy's will before the first shot was fired. For in warfare, fear was as potent as fire. As the Arab fleets massed for their decisive assault, the secret of Greek fire lay locked behind the palace walls, entrusted to a chosen few. And when the order came to unleash it, the seas of the Marmara would blaze with a fury the world had never seen. The dawn of 678 AD broke with a sky the color of burnished steel, the sea calm yet heavy with an unseen tension. In the harbors of Constantinople, the Byzantine fleet readied for battle. Every creak of wood, every clink of chain seemed amplified, the quiet before a storm not of wind and rain, but of fire and blood. From the watchtowers of the sea walls, sentries spotted the Arab fleet. Row upon row of galleys filled the horizon, their sails taut in the morning breeze. The scale was staggering, hundreds of ships, their prows cutting through the Marmara with mechanical precision. Banners of green and white rippled against the sky, the call to prayer rising faintly over the water, a sound both haunting and defiant. On the flagship of the Byzantines, Emperor Constantine IV stood among his officers. His eyes fixed on the approaching armada, his jaw set with the knowledge that this day could decide the fate of the empire. Behind him, the dragon-headed siphons gleamed in the pale light, their bronze mouths silent but ready. The Arab fleet advanced in a wide crescent, a formation designed to envelop and crush their enemy. Drums thundered in rhythm with the oars, each beat drawing them closer. The Byzantines, outnumbered, formed a compact wedge, their goal to pierce the enemy's center with devastating force. Then came the signal, a raised crimson banner atop the emperor's flagship. The rowers surged forward. The gap between the fleets narrowed. The air thickened with the smell of salt and pitch. At a calculated distance, the order rang out, "Release the fire." With a roar like a furnace opening, the first siphon unleashed its payload. A stream of blazing liquid arced through the air, catching the sun in a dazzling burst before slamming into the lead Arab galley. Flames exploded outward, racing along the deck, leaping to the rigging. Men screamed as they tried to douse the inferno with buckets of seawater, only to watch in horror as the fire burned hotter, climbing up the very streams they poured. More siphons joined in. The sea itself seemed to ignite as the liquid fire splattered across waves, forming a writhing carpet of flame that clung to hulls and oars alike. Ships tried to veer away, but the tight formation trapped them. Panic rippled through the crescent. Some captains ordered retreat, others pressed forward, hoping to break the Byzantine wedge before the fire consumed them. The noise was deafening, the hiss and crackle of burning pitch, the splintering of masts, the cries of men leaping into water only to be caught by the fiery tide. Smoke rolled across the waves, turning the daylight into a shifting, hellish twilight. The Byzantines pressed their advantage. Triremes and dromons rammed into disoriented enemy ships, their soldiers boarding with swords and axes to finish the work the flames had begun. Every strike of steel, every collapsing deck pushed the Arab fleet further into chaos. One Arab flagship attempted to rally the retreating ships, turning broadside to fire a volley of arrows at the Byzantine vanguard. But before they could release a second wave, a jet of Greek fire struck midship, engulfing the vessel in an instant. The flames shot skyward like a beacon, not of hope, but of utter ruin. Hours later, the Marmara was littered with blackened wreckage. Charred beams bobbed alongside bodies, the sea stained with the remnants of battle. The surviving Arab ships pulled back, their retreat rapid and uncoordinated. What had begun as an overwhelming assault ended in a rout. On the decks of the Byzantine fleet, men stood in stunned silence, their faces lit by the flicker of smoldering debris. They had seen victory before, but never like this, never with such terrible, awe-inspiring power. Yet amid the triumph, a sobering truth lingered. The empire had shown its hand. The secret of Greek fire was now known to their enemies, even if the formula remained hidden. Word of the weapon would spread across the seas, inspiring both fear and a desperate desire to replicate it. For today, Constantinople was safe. The siege would lift, the city would breathe again, and the empire would stand, its flag rising above the waters that had turned to flame. But in the quiet hearts of the emperor's council, they knew the war was far from over. The fire had saved them, but it had also made them a target unlike any before. The waters of the Marmara still carried the scent of smoke when the real battle began, not on the sea, but in the guarded corridors of the imperial palace. Greek fire had saved Constantinople, yet its very existence now invited danger of a different kind. Emperor Constantine IV understood that the weapon's power lay not only in its flames, but in its mystery. If the formula fell into enemy hands, the empire's greatest advantage would become its greatest threat. Thus the decision was made, the knowledge of Greek fire would be a state secret of the highest order, guarded with the same vigilance as the imperial treasury. Only a handful of individuals, the emperor, his closest engineers, and select naval officers, knew even fragments of the formula. No single man possessed the complete recipe, ensuring that betrayal by one would not doom the empire. Ingredients were procured from multiple corners of the realm, disguised as routine trade shipments. The workshops where the mixture was prepared were hidden deep within the palace complex, accessible only through guarded passages. The secrecy bred paranoia. Every foreign merchant who asked too many questions about shipbuilding, every servant who lingered near the docks, became a potential spy. Byzantine intelligence agents, the logothetes, extended their network into every port and shipyard, searching for signs of enemy infiltration. Punishment for even suspected leaks was swift and merciless. And the enemies were indeed watching. The Arab fleets, humbled but not defeated, sent envoys under flags of truce, offering gold, alliances, even the promise of peace in exchange for the secret. When diplomacy failed, they turned to bribery and espionage, attempting to lure discontented sailors into revealing what they knew. Some captives were interrogated at length, but none could explain how the fire was made, for none had seen its full creation. Rumors spread across the Mediterranean. In the taverns of Alexandria, sailors swore they had seen fire burst from the mouths of dragons. In the markets of Antioch, merchants told tales of a Byzantine sorcerer who could command the elements. The more the truth was hidden, the larger the legend grew. But secrecy came at a cost. The knowledge was so tightly guarded that even within Byzantium only a select few could maintain and operate the weapon. When these masters died, their skills often died with them, forcing the empire to train replacements under the same suffocating layers of protection. Years passed, and Greek fire remained a ghost story to most of the world, an unprovable terror until the moment it reappeared in battle. This uncertainty was its own kind of warfare. Enemies had to plan for the possibility of fire at any naval encounter, altering strategies, spreading their fleets thin, and diluting their strength. The Byzantines had forged a weapon of unmatched destruction, and built an invisible wall around it. Yet they knew that walls, no matter how strong, eventually crack. Somewhere beyond the empire's borders, men still schemed to steal the fire from its masters. And one day, perhaps, they might succeed. For centuries after that first fiery victory, Greek fire remained the Byzantine Empire's most feared and guarded weapon. It flared in battles against Bulgars, Rus, and Arab fleets, each time reinforcing the legend of the empire's unquenchable flame. But as with all things born of men's hands, its dominance was not eternal. The decline came not in a single moment, but in a slow erosion. The empire's borders shrank. Territories rich in resources, the very ones that had supplied the ingredients for the fire, slipped from imperial control. Skilled engineers died or were killed in battle, and with each loss, fragments of the weapon's knowledge faded into silence. By the 13th century, the once mighty Byzantium was a shadow of itself, surrounded by rising powers and riven by internal strife. Greek fire was still spoken of in whispers, yet its use had become rare, sporadic, almost ceremonial. The weapon that had once ruled the waves was now a relic, more legend than reality. Historians still debate how its secret was lost. Some claim that it was a casualty of political chaos, that the final keepers of the formula took it to their graves rather than see it fall into foreign hands. Others believe that the knowledge became so compartmentalized, so jealously guarded, that it eventually became inaccessible even to the Byzantines themselves. A few suggest that the specific chemical sources had run dry, that the empire could no longer obtain the volatile materials that gave the fire its fury. Whatever the cause, by the time Constantinople faced its final siege in 1453, there was no Greek fire to defend it. The walls that had defied centuries of enemies fell to Ottoman cannons, and the city's great flame was extinguished. And yet, the legend endured. Even today, Greek fire remains a mystery that has never been conclusively solved. Scientists have recreated plausible formulas, but none have captured the exact, almost supernatural qualities described in medieval accounts. Perhaps the true recipe lies buried beneath centuries of earth in some forgotten vault, or perhaps it was always as much myth as it was science. The story of Greek fire is more than the tale of a weapon. It is a lesson in the impermanence of power, how even the mightiest innovations can vanish, and how the fear they inspire can outlast their reality. In its time, it saved an empire. In its absence, it became a symbol, a flicker of human ingenuity burning briefly against the darkness of history. And so, somewhere in the depths of the past, the last ember of the flame that once ruled the seas fades into shadow, leaving behind not ashes, but legend.